Modi South Coast. Go ahead, Premier.
Great, thank you very much. And as you know, we are here assembled on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nation. The last few days have been incredibly difficult for British Columbians as we've experienced yet another natural disaster. Heavy rains, strong winds, flooding have devastated entire communities of our province. Thousands of people have been forced from their homes under evacuation orders, and many others were left stranded between road closures and mudslides. Yesterday, the RCMP confirmed the mudslides have claimed at least one life. That's devastating news for a family. It's devastating news for all British Columbians, but sadly, we expect to confirm even more fatalities in the coming days. Yesterday, I spoke to Prime Minister Trudeau. He offered to provide assistance where needed to help us respond to the immediate disaster, as well as working with communities to rebuild going forward. The province has now formally requested that deployment of federal resources, including the armed forces, to assist with evacuations, managing of supply chains and resupply chains, security in inundated areas, as well as restoration of safe drinking water and other logistics assistance. I'd also want to thank the governments of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, who were immediate in their offer of assistance to help in any way they can. Minister Popham will talk about a practical example that is going to serve us very, very well in the short term when she has her opportunity to speak. Multiple highways remain closed throughout BC. We're working diligently to assess the damage and make sure that we can get those supply roads back in shape as quickly as possible. But the conditions are severe, and it's essential that we work on these corridors in a way that makes safety our highest priority. And this means essential and emergency access will be limited in the days ahead. Already strained supply lines are at risk of greater disruption. Therefore, as of noon today, the Government of BC is declaring a state of emergency. The order will preserve basic access to services and supplies for communities across the province. We will bring in travel restrictions and ensure that transportation of essential goods and medical and emergency services are able to reach the communities that need them. Please do not hoard items. What you need, your neighbors need as well. We are confident that we can restore our supply chains in a quick and orderly manner, provided we all act as we have been acting over the past 2 years, responding to challenges like this in a collaborative, cooperative way to make sure that everyone can come through this in one piece. These are very challenging times. I don't need to say that I've been at this dais over the past 2 years talking about the challenges we've faced. Unprecedented challenges with public health, wildfires, heat domes, and now debilitating floods that we have never seen before. I spoke last evening with Mayor Linda Brown and her team in Merritt, and over the past 6 months, we had drought conditions in Merritt where the river was at its lowest point in living memory, where we had people evacuated because of wildfires raging in temperatures that were unprecedented. And now we have the entire community underwater, safe water and waste treatment not accessible to citizens. Despite that, the resilient people of Merritt, who have been evacuated not once but twice in the past number of weeks, stand ready to work together and cooperate with their neighbors and communities right around the region to get through this. The decisions we've made today have formed a working group of cabinet that consists of myself as the chair, Deputy Premier Mike Farnworth as the vice chair, Minister Popham, Minister Fleming, Minister Rankin, Minister Osborne, as well as Minister Robinson and Minister Ma, to ensure that we have expertise at the table on a daily basis. But this is an across-government response. Everyone will be pulling together. There's not a person that hasn't been affected or will not be affected by the events of this past weekend. We need to, as British Columbians, as we have done through the pandemic, as we did through wildfires in 2017 and 2018 and again this year, at almost every turn when we've hit crisis, British Columbians have rallied. They've rallied because of their resilience. And for those who understand and recognize that these events are increasing in regularity because of the effects of human-caused climate change, there is hope in terms of the roadmap to 2030 that we've developed here in British Columbia and the leadership that Canada is showing on the international stage to bring the other 7 billion souls on this planet to the position where we can understand that we need to act now to make the changes in our community and in our economy that will protect us from these types of events in the future. I'm now happy to pass the podium over to Minister Farnworth, who will walk through the events of the day, and then on to other ministers to update you on the circumstances in their various files.
Thank you, Premier, and good afternoon, everyone. And I'm honored to be here on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people and the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. As the Premier announced, today we are declaring a provincial state of emergency based on advice that I've received from Emergency Management BC and the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. While the province has been able to take all necessary steps to respond to the emergency to this point, the next steps in this response may necessitate extraordinary measures only available through this declaration under the Emergency Program Act. This province-wide declaration will help us with the challenges ahead as we recover from the utter devastation that we are seeing. As you know, multiple highways remain closed throughout BC, causing disruptions to travel. And I encourage everyone not to travel unless it is essential. This is not the time for travel for leisure purposes. Our transportation infrastructure is crippled, and we need to ensure that it comes back online as quickly as possible, and we are prioritizing essential access. As the Premier stated, this is a catastrophic event, and we need to work to get through it together. We've been doing that through the COVID pandemic. We've been doing that through other emergencies in this province, and we're going to have to do it again. It's challenging, but I know all of us as British Columbians are up for that challenge. Above all, we need to ensure that everyone has access to food, water, and essential goods. We know people are concerned. We're aware as government, and industry is aware. We need to remain calm. There are many areas where there are not disruptions and goods are able to flow. Getting our roadways and rail back up and in operation is our #1 priority, and the Ministry of Transportation will provide whatever resources are necessary to make that happen. Emergency Management BC and our government as a whole will work to provide anything else that is needed. We fully recognize how important it is to reopen road connections from the Lower Mainland to the interior to get those supply chains moving. This declaration will allow us to implement any provincial emergency measures and allow access to all assets that may be necessary to prevent, respond, or to alleviate the effects of an emergency. This may include measures to prohibit non-essential travel, to prevent hoarding, to prevent price gouging, similar to what we had to do during the COVID-19 emergency. This may also include accessing any infrastructure at the province's disposal. In short, we will be doing everything possible. Also, as many of you know, late last night, the City of Abbotsford issued a warning to any remaining residents in an evacuated area in Sumas Prairie due to a potential failure of the pump station. People have been evacuating, but once again, I just want to make it clear, if anyone remains in this area, you need to leave immediately. I've been in contact with Bill Blair, my federal counterpart, the Federal Minister of Emergency Preparedness, to access federal assistance in this incident and the flooding situation in general. This includes Canadian Armed Forces, ground and air support. I'd also like to thank all first responders, local governments, and volunteers who have been working around the clock, responding to the flooding and helping people in need. I'll now pass it over to Minister Fleming for a further update.
Thank you and good afternoon. I want to provide this update from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. about how we are doing work to continue to reopen our roadways. I would first like to extend my sincere thanks to so many people who are doing incredible heavy lifting out there right across our province. Thousands of people are stepping up in extremely challenging conditions. People are helping strangers who have been stranded. They're providing food and shelter. Search and rescue volunteers are out there battling fatigue and continuing to do their job to keep people safe. Provincial staff from both the Emergency Management BC, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and our road maintenance contractors are doing their jobs. Federal and local government partners, fire departments, and volunteers are putting in amazing efforts to help people and to restore connectivity in our road networks. There are countless others who will be mentioned in the days ahead who have done heroic things. As we move forward on reestablishing our transportation corridors, the outpouring of help and support has been nothing short of inspirational. Our ministry yesterday was able to get a first-hand look at the impacts of the worst weather storm in a century and the impacts it's had on our infrastructure. And our staff are now putting together specific repair plans for those sites that have sustained significant damage. Our immediate priority, as I mentioned yesterday, is to reestablish connections from the Lower Mainland to the interior and the north parts of the province. We know how vitally important it is to open routes and to have supply chains moving. That is our focus. We are working on this focus with multiple partners. And again, people and companies are really stepping up. CN Rail has been exceptionally helpful, moving people and goods by air, by helicopter, while work continues to open their rail lines. BC Ferries here on the coast is adding sailings for cargo out of Duke Point to Schwartz Bay to connect the South Island with the Mid and North Island, as well as extra sailings on the Mill Bay, Brentwood Bay route, while work continues to fully open the Malahat Highway 1. The BC Trucking Association has been hugely supportive of our efforts to find alternate routes, as well as working with the province and the federal government, who are helping to facilitate goods movement through the United States that would otherwise be impacted by events in the Lower Mainland. Work is progressing to open highway routes along Highway 7 west of Agassiz. Emergency vehicle access was established yesterday, as I updated people. And I'm pleased to announce that as a couple of hours ago, that has opened up to single-lane alternating traffic. But again, for essential travel only. This is for people who have urgent needs, people who need to move livestock, people who need to move additional pump equipment to the Sumas Prairie area and the Barrowtown pump station. Last night, for example, our road maintenance contractor, Emil Anderson, delivered 40,000 sandbags to the Barrowtown pump station. Access via Highway 7 was critical to accomplishing this, and it speaks to the importance of keeping these roads for essential movement only. There was some unnecessary congestion on Highway 7 last night that impeded some of the efforts, but we got through it and people were cooperative. But that is why I ask the public to please still avoid that area if your travel is not absolutely essential. On the other side of Agassiz, towards Hope on Highway 7, we should have emergency vehicle access established later today, and we will notify the media and the public as we progress. Again, I want to stress how important it is that the general public not try to access that route for the time being, as you will only impede the safety of others with urgent needs. We're working closely with Emergency Management BC to prioritize people getting out of Hope who've been stranded there. But please, again, for the general public, stay away from those areas on Highway 7. In fact, as a general rule, if you're safe and secure where you are, we ask you keep any travel in impacted areas in your region to only that which is absolutely essential. Other highway networks for me to update today. Progress is being made on clearing and repairing some of the other routes, including Highway 3, Highway 99, as well as Highway 1, the Malahat on Vancouver Island. Highway 3, by the end of the weekends, will be open to emergency access, and we continue to work to restore full traffic on that route. Highway 99, work began this morning. The pavement appears to be intact on that route after we have cleared debris and slide material. We should have an update on the projected opening of Highway 99 by the end of today. Highway 1, as I mentioned, the Malahat here, the Island Highway, continued work is happening. The overnight closures last night were successful. Single lane alternating traffic is open in daylight hours, and for the next 5 and if necessary 6 evenings, there will be closures at night when we will advise the public of that. This is a huge job, but collectively we're up to the challenge, and we will get things opened up again just as soon as we possibly can. For my ministry, Janelle State will provide a detailed update on roadwork status across the province, as she has been doing. But I want to say in closing, just to reiterate the points that the Premier and Minister Farnworth have made, we're doing everything we can that is possible to get transportation links open and get people and goods moving. No resources will be spared. The federal government is highly engaged, and I want to thank Minister Alghabra again for the assistance he is providing. And they are ready to provide support and are providing support. And again, I want to thank all the emergency crews who have worked day and night since the weekend, tirelessly to keep people safe. And for those in the public who have stepped up to help each other in this incredibly difficult time. And I will now pass things over to Minister Popham.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a very difficult time for agriculture in BC and our producers, especially in the Fraser Valley. My heart goes out to everyone affected by the flooding right now, and we're working hard to make contact with every association that we can. Over the last 2 days, we've made over 300 contacts with associations, with local government associations, with farmers directly, and this is being done through ministry support. We have lists of contacts that we use during emergencies. We've also been using social media to ask people to contact us if anybody has fallen through the cracks. I feel confident that we've covered off most commodity groups, and people understand that we're there with them. Our commitment in the ministry is to make sure that we are with them through this continuing emergency state, and that we'll be with them in recovery. There are some difficult issues that we're dealing with around animal welfare. There's probably hundreds of farms that have been affected by flooding. Some are still underwater, some are on dry locations, and we have thousands of animals that have perished. We have many, many more that are in difficult situations, and we're seeing an animal welfare issue develop. They need attention, and so with my colleagues, we're developing routes so that veterinarians can access farms and get to the animals as soon as possible. There will have to be euthanizations that happen, but there are also animals who have survived that are going to be in critical need for food in the next 24 hours. We knew we had a window of about 3 to 4 days in our poultry sector, in our dairy sector, but those stores are running out now. And some of the food that has been stored is underwater itself. So we've made contact with feed mills. We've made contacts with our colleagues across the nation to try and access food that's going to be needed to keep these animals healthy. I can tell you the contacts that I've made over the years, we exchange cell phone numbers. And so over the last 2 days, I've been able to have FaceTime discussions with farmers, and some of them are in their barns, and some of their barns are flooded, and you can see the animals that are deceased, and it's heartbreaking. This is an especially difficult time for our livestock producers. We will make sure that disaster relief funds are available for farmers and that we're supporting them in every step of the way. Another unfortunate situation is that our agricultural animal and health lab has been flooded in the Fraser Valley. And that's an important piece of infrastructure that we need to do disease testing, but it also tests for milk in our milk supply. So we are very grateful that Alberta and Saskatchewan have reached out to us and offered their lab services. That's going to make a big difference as we try and get back on our feet. The minister, the federal minister of agriculture, Minister Bibeau, has reached out and dedicated her support. I've also heard directly from the Minister of Ontario, who has also lent her support as well. And so this is early days in this disaster for agriculture. Things are still unfolding, but myself, along with my colleagues and the Premier, were committed to making sure that agriculture is supported as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, and with that, we'll take questions from the floor, and we do have technical experts online that may well be better suited than any of us to answer questions that you may have, but we're here to give you the best information we can at this time. So over to you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Premier. As a reminder to everybody on the phone line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You're limited to one question and one follow-up. We will start with phone questions today and go to the room at the end. First question today is from Justine Hunter, Globe and Mail. Justine, are you there? Okay, we'll come back to Justine. Lisa Cordasco, Vancouver Sun.
Thank you. Premier, over the weekend, or I should say on Monday, MLA Bruce Banman said that he raised concerns about the Nootsack River on Monday during an emergency briefing, and he said that officials looked at him blankly, and there wasn't any reaction from him on that. Now, previous to this, over the weekend, you met virtually with your Washington State counterpart. Were you briefed at all about the measures they were already taking, like sandbagging the Nootsack River on their side? And what did you do with that information?
Well, you don't have accurate information, Lisa. I did not meet with Governor Inslee. I participated in a Cascadia Corridor forum with him yesterday, and we had a brief discussion before the conference began about the situation above and below the border. But I had no briefing on the Nootsack River, and I didn't get the name of the individual you referred to. But I can assure you that the Forest, Lands, and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development regularly monitors not just rivers in British Columbia, but in adjacent jurisdictions to ensure that we have the most accurate information available. And I can say very confidently that those professional government employees take this work very seriously, and we depend on that good work, not just domestically but in other jurisdictions, to plan and prepare as best we can. That's why alerts go out. And again, I don't know the individual. I didn't hear the name, and I had no briefings over the weekend on any rivers in the United States.
Do you have a follow-up, Lisa?
Yes, thank you. Is it acceptable that the province has relied on Drive BC, Environment Canada, and local areas to inform local people about what's happening? And why did the province not step in and use the Alert Ready system to inform all of us in BC, which may have made some people think twice about traveling over the weekend and on Monday?
And thank you for that question. The Alert Ready system is something that is a tool. It is not a silver bullet. It is intended to be able to do very much localized, focused alerts. In terms of alerts that were taking place, Drive BC is the go-to site for drivers traveling around the province. Flood and stream warnings are updated on a regular basis, and as are flood advisories communicated to local governments, who are able to take that information, do the work that they need to do. Crews are out on the weekend, both at the local level and in terms of ministry and transportation and highways. And so they were doing what they're supposed to do. The reality is that this weather event was unprecedented. Even though we were expecting heavy rainfall, significant rainfall, it was beyond what any of us expected. And even the experts were just completely surprised by it. That also being said, when it comes to the Alert Ready system, it's also done on the advice of affected communities. And we will always take that advice in terms of when and how to use it.
Next question is from Belle Puri, CBC.
So a little bit on what Lisa was touching on, but kind of looking ahead and what's happening right now, what kind of cooperation, if any, is coming from the United States to deal with the Sumas flooding?
Well, again, I did have a conversation with Governor Inslee yesterday about the situation above and below the border. We have a very positive working relationship at the political level as well as at the administrative level, and I'm confident that information is being exchanged and best practices are in place. I'll also add, I spoke with Mayor Linda Brown from Merritt and her chief administrative officer, and the highest measurement, and I'll get the units of measurement incorrect, but the numbers speak for themselves. The highest recorded measurement of a unit going through Merritt was 145, and on Sunday evening it was 500. Not twice, but 3 times what was the historic high. Unprecedented, as was the impact of heat in the summer. These are extraordinary events not measured before, not contemplated before in putting in place where people will live, where roads are constructed, a whole host of initiatives about adaptation to the world that we now live in with respect to climate change will flow not just from the events of this past year, but those that we can now better predict based on these extraordinary once-in-a-500-year event. That will help us better prepare for the future, but there was nothing that could have been done by a 3 times the historic high volume of water traveling through Merritt in one day. We had more rain in 2 days than we normally get in an entire November. And we all know that we live in a rainforest. We get wet in November, but nothing remotely resembling this. And I think all British Columbians fully understand that now we have to better prepare for events like this, but we couldn't have even imagined it 6 months ago.
Follow-up, Belle?
Yes, please. So we just heard the Agriculture Minister talk about the dire situation with animals, and some are trapped and some have died. What warnings are being issued about the floodwater itself, especially when people are probably just, desperate to try to rescue some of their things?
I think my colleague, Minister Farnworth, will be able to answer that from his perspective, but from an agriculture perspective, I know that many people have seen the rescue attempts that have been attempted in the Fraser Valley. Farmers are desperate to move their animals. We've seen them trying to move them in boats. We've seen them towing them through the river. And so I think that we're not encouraging that, but we understand why that happens, because farmers are desperately trying to find a safe, dry spot, high spot for their animals. I think most of that has already happened. The animals that are getting moved through those water flows have been able to make it to a safe spot, but to tell you the truth, that they're not in good shape by the time they get there. And so I can also tell you that many farmers attempted to move animals and then had to walk away because the roads were disappearing beneath them. And so I think Minister Farnworth might be able to address the floodwaters better, but that's the agricultural perspective.
Thank you for that question. So in terms of the floodwaters themselves, one of the things that happens during situations like this is that certain areas of water systems get shut down. So, for example, one of the reasons why the evacuation order in Merritt went from the initial 2,000 households to the entire town was because of the potential compromising of the sewage and water treatment plant. So that had to be shut down, which meant not being able to access water, of course, which then meant you have to evacuate the whole town. In the agricultural areas, likewise, when it comes to water systems that are near the manure and sewage things, that gets shut down. And then so that you're protecting the integrity of the rest of the water system. We work very closely with local communities on this, as well as any water issues. We will be working with public health.
Next question is from Lisa Yuzda, City News.
Other ministers and Premier, regarding this conversation about the use of the alert system and how people can know what's happening and what is possible, and I think you made clear that it's something that is asked for by locals and doesn't work quite the way I think many people think it does. But considering this is, the third unprecedented event, do we need to look at, or what can be looked at of changing how we approach these kinds of events when they're coming? Premier, you were saying it's wet. We get very wet here, but do we need to look at the fact that these things are not what they used to be? And does there need to be a look at changing these alerts perhaps coming earlier, just in case?
Thank you for that question. In terms of alerts, many communities have alerting systems in place. And I know that there is a lot of focus on the Alert Ready system. It has a place. And it is, as I said, it is one tool. We've indicated that we want to have a system in place next year, that we will start first in the central interior. But we have to make sure that it works in compatibility with existing systems that are in place, that you're not overlapping, and that you're avoiding duplication. And we also have to recognize that many areas do not have, so for example, if you're on the Coquihalla Highway at 120 an hour, or where there's no cell coverage, an Alert Ready system is not going to be of assistance. Like last night in Abbotsford, for example, the community initially looked at wanting to use the Alert Ready. But when it became apparent that in the evacuation order, what you're going to be doing is, in fact, broadcasting to a larger area, and the potential for panic and putting strain on emergency resources, which are working overtime and round the clock to deal with a situation. And they determined that no, this is not the appropriate point to use this, that what they were doing was going door to door, that was the most effective way. That's how these decisions need to be made, by the experts on the ground, not by experts on Twitter, but the experts on the ground dealing with that local situation, understanding the local conditions. And I can tell you, as Solicitor General, I will always take their experience, their expertise, that local knowledge, when it comes when and how to deploy an alert, and when and how to deploy resources.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, and more broadly, with maybe a warning that people maybe shouldn't have been driving with that kind of rain coming. With these events turning unprecedented, presumably because of climate change, is it time for those more broad-based warnings to be we don't know what this is that's coming exactly, and maybe people need to err on the side of caution? And also, just a little side note, I'm wondering if you can talk about, with the hoarding, if you're going to be asking people to only, or putting in orders that people can only take certain amounts of eggs or milk or that types of goods from stores.
And thank you for the question. Obviously, whenever we have an event like this, a situation like this, we learn lessons from that, and we undoubtedly will. What we have in place right now is a system of alerts involving Drive BC, flood warnings to local communities. We have highway signs in place, all of those things. If we need to do more, we most certainly will do more. That's one of the important things in terms of dealing with these kinds of situations. It's also one of the reasons why we are currently undergoing that significant rewrite of the Emergency Program Act to take into account climate change, to put in place the latest approaches and ways of dealing with disasters. Being the first province in this country, besides the federal government, to sign up to the Sendai framework, which is how to approach disasters. So it's about adaptation, it's about mitigation, it's about response and recovery, all of those things together. So we are very much, going to be learning the lessons from this and putting in new measures and new approaches, obviously.
Colton Davies, Radio NL.
Hi, can you hear me?
Just hang on, Colton. Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about details on the travel restrictions and when those will be brought in. For the details, I'm assuming this would impact travel between the southern interior and lower mainland. And would there be roadblocks for the few highways that will be open in the weeks ahead, like for the Hope Princeton or even the Duffy Lake Road, which is obviously less used?
Thank you. Yes, and That's exactly what you saw on Highway 7 last night. The RCMP were there informing people that were seeking to commute along the reopened Highway 7 west of Agassiz that it was for essential movement only. And of course, that's how we got things like pumping equipment to the Barrowtown station, how we got our contractors and others who lent an effort overnight to reinforce the pumping station. So when we give an update that will connect Hope to the interior via Route 3, because that's our focus right now, we will make it clear that it will likely be restricted traffic. We'll want to get trucks queued up to where they need to be, and we'll want emergency vehicles to have access. And quite frankly, it's about getting heavy equipment in there first, because we can punch a hole through, but then we've got to clear up a lot of debris and get the highway to a much higher state of functionality so that we can open more than just one lane. And so that's the approach we took on Highway 1 on Vancouver Island, and that's the approach we'll take on Highway 3.
Follow-up, Colton?
Yeah, just to build on that, when the Hope Princeton does reopen, is the province concerned that, even if it's fully open, it's mostly an undivided rural highway with one lane each way? Would it be able to handle the capacity of even just essential traffic, of truck traffic and other kinds of movements? And I'm also curious what the province might be able to say about the timelines for reopening for CP&C and rail, if they have any indications that those rail lines could reopen in the Fraser Canyon even sooner than when Highway 1 might reopen through that corridor too.
Yeah. So when we reopen Highway 3 and other highways like the 99, there will be, it will be to drive to conditions. And conditions will in some cases be single alternating traffic, and there will be congestion, there will be truck corridor traffic, so the speed limits and the driving conditions will be taken into account into how to use those routes until a higher degree of functionality is restored. So as we get more capacity, we will change the instructions about how to drive highway networks that we reopen. We will provide an update with our federal colleagues from Transport Canada. There's been a high degree of mobilization with CN and CP Rail to repair sections of track that were underwater and infrastructure that is damaged. I don't have that update currently, but that's the focus of my discussions with Minister Alghabra, and the companies will likely provide an update, I think, with the federal government and ourselves. So we'll. What I can say is that there is reports of good progress. So a more fulsome update is pending.
Next question is from Richard Zisman, Global News.
Premier, around the powers of the state of emergency, what specifically can the province do to stop people from hoarding? We're seeing pictures, as you are well aware, not just in the communities that are cut off, but in many other communities that are not cut off. So what specifically can be done in that regard? And in terms of the powers of the state of emergency, what can be done in terms of travel? And does that include those who are right now stuck in an area like Hope and not able to get home? Are they part of the priority group?
Well, certainly our priority is to get people back to where they need to be. Where they live is the best place to be. We do know, based on our experience with state of emergency and the COVID pandemic in the early days, and as well at those difficult times when there were concerns about supply chains, that we can take actions to protect and preserve the civility that we expect from our neighbours and our colleagues. And I'm confident that Mr. Farnworth can give you more details on the tools that he has at his disposal as the Solicitor General, as well as the Minister responsible for the Emergency Preparedness Act. But for me, this is about British Columbians doing what we've been doing over the past almost 2 years, of respecting each other and recognizing that we are living through an extraordinary historic time with respect to the pandemic, and now with respect to an inundation that is unprecedented in our history. And I think that most people, I'm confident that the vast majority of British Columbians are going to bear down and we're going to work through this. The four of us and the cabinet who met today to deliberate and look at the information are people doing the jobs that we were elected to do. But we're doing that on behalf of the thousands of people that Rob talked about that are standing at the ready. The building trades unions, the Road Builders Association, all saying, let's go. When do we start? We're putting in place measures to ensure that we can accelerate contracts and tenders so we can get the work done in a way and a manner that British Columbians would expect. But those are decisions that we make to allow the creativity and the power of the great innovative people of British Columbia to do this work. So I'm very confident that the people who built British Columbia will be able to rebuild it as quickly as is safe to do so. With respect to the hoarding, again, I'm saying people, do the right thing. Listen to what your mom told you when you were little. Do unto others as you would have do unto you. Respect the fact that you do not need 48 eggs. A dozen will do, and leave the rest for somebody else.
Go ahead, Richard.
I'm trying to get an understanding. We have crews in the Pemberton area that have gone over the site in which we've seen one confirmed fatality, and Premier, as you mentioned, there are potentially more. What they see from the air is that crews are not able at this point to access. I don't know if you have the technical information on this or if the RCMP can weigh in, but I'm just trying to understand what work is being done on the ground to help provide some certainty to these families and also to better understand the work that's being done. And also, Premier, if you can at the end, I've been asked to get you to comment as well on the federal government changing rules around PCR testing at the border. I know it's a separate issue, but I'm hoping at the end you can also speak to that change as well.
Well, why don't I respond to that first, Richard, and then allow Rob and Mike to talk about the work being done on the road, because they're the responsible for those activities, and I know Minister Farnworth and the RCMP are working intently on that. I'm grateful. We had a First Minister's meeting yesterday to talk about COVID, as we have been for what seems like an interminable period of time, but important decisions were made by the federal government with respect to our border crossings with the United States. We are very happy to hear that the PCR testing rules that were in place for short visits will no longer apply for those who want to travel to the United States for a day or two. I raised this issue through interventions by people here in British Columbia some weeks ago, and I'm grateful that the federal government has responded. There's still a host of challenges when it comes to COVID-19. I don't want people to think that that we can't manage these multiple challenges, because of course we have to. That's our job. But the level of cooperation that we've seen across the country when it comes to COVID, the responsiveness of the federal government to requests from provinces, and we're diverse, as everyone knows who's traveled across this country. The issues in Saskatchewan are not the issues in New Brunswick, nor northern British Columbia is quite distinct from southern Ontario. But we have all been coming together to address these issues collectively as Canadians. And that has borne significant fruit on COVID. And as Lana has testified today, those relationships have allowed us to rapidly put in place systems that will protect the health of British Columbians with respect to the agriculture crisis that we're now facing, because we were able to work collaboratively in the past. Many will know that I've had differences of opinion with Alberta governments on a number of issues, but on the very, very basic elements of how do we work together. Albertans, people from Ontario, Quebecers, British Columbians, all speak with one voice, that we need to hang together through these difficult times and make decisions that are in the best interest of all British Columbians. To have Ottawa respond to our overtures, and those from Yukon Territory, quite frankly, to remove the testing requirements for those who have been double vaccinated was a good move. It's good public policy, and it was done at our request, and I'm grateful to the federal government for doing that work. And I'll now ask Mike to talk about the challenging issues that you touched on your preliminary question, Richard.
Thank you for that question. This is obviously a very challenging and difficult situation, and a very tragic situation. The RCMP yesterday did confirm one individual, and are looking and working to determine how many other fatalities they are. I think it's appropriate that I ask Assistant Commissioner Stubbs to give more detail in terms of the work and how it's taking place and what the RCMP are doing. So I would defer to Assistant Commissioner Stubbs.
Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Minister. As the Minister mentioned, the work is very complex. The geotechnical analysis of the area is being conducted, and it has to be deemed safe in order for the emergency specialists to gain access to the search site. We're meeting every day with them to assess it because the site does change, and that work will continue. As mentioned, we did confirm that there has been one fatality. We have not confirmed any additional fatalities. However, we are or have received what we believe to be 3 missing person reports of people that may be associated to the mudslide. There have been numerous other missing person reports, but we have deconflicted those reports to determine whether or not those people were anywhere near that area.
Thank you. Minister Fleming.
Yeah, thank you. And just to the other part of Richard's question around restoring road capacity and getting into challenged areas that have slides and debris on them. It's really inch by inch or kilometer by kilometer. For a specific update to the highway that I think you were referring to, I will turn things over to our Regional Director, Janelle State, to make some additional comments.
Go ahead, Janelle.
On Highway 99, south of Lillooet, we originally thought there was 3 slide sites. There is in fact only 2 slide sites. We have cleared one of the slide sites that is discrete from the one that we're still working closely with the RCMP and search and rescue on. So at the one slide site where we had been able to clear the debris, that is where we do know that the pavement is in fact intact. Still debris to be done, but at least we can get through. At this point, our contractor continues to work closely with the RCMP, recognizing the sensitivity of the situation.
Rob Shaw, Check News.
Is anyone able to speak to the gasoline supply situation in BC right now? I know the Trans Mountain Pipeline's been closed for several days. We're seeing lineups at gas stations. Some gas stations are running out. Is there an issue with that supply? Is it an issue of getting gasoline at gas stations? Is it an issue of getting gas to British Columbia, or what is the current situation right now? Does anyone know?
What I can tell you in terms of gasoline and other supplies is that we are working very closely with distributors, with transportation companies in terms of how new routes are required if necessary. We will be monitoring and working very closely to ensure that there are fuel supplies getting to where they are needed, and that will be very much a priority in terms of the work going forward.
Follow up, Rob?
And then just on the hoarding situation, when we saw the original kind of problems in grocery stores with COVID, there were limits put on people and what they could purchase: water, toilet paper, canned goods. Why are we not doing that right now? And would that not address some of the empty store shelves we're seeing?
I'll make a couple of comments in regard to that. That is one of the areas under the state of emergency where emergency powers could be used, for example, in terms of dealing with not just hoarding but with gouging, and we saw it was effective in terms of dealing with during the COVID situation. The reality is also this, that many stores, and we're working with the Retail Council, already in discussions with the Retail Council on supply in general, many retailers took it upon themselves to put in place limits on items once they noticed, that there was a run on certain products, or people were buying 40 rolls of toilet paper. And what it really comes down to is what the Premier talked about, doing the right thing, recognizing that you don't need 4 dozen eggs, a dozen will do. And the Retail Council and the transportation, the trucking industry have already been really clear. There's lots of supply. Yes, we have routes that are challenged, but you know what? There's large areas of the province where those routes are not compromised, and supplies are going to get through. And in those isolated communities, there are plans. If supplies need to be brought in, we can do that. Just to remind people, because we've heard in cases in northern BC, the routes from Edmonton to Prince George to Prince Rupert are wide open. And the trucks will be going back and forth, and there will be plenty of supply. So people need to do the right thing, be patient, and the goods are going to get to where they need to get to.
I just wanted to also just add something. So during the pandemic, it wasn't that we were going to run out of food. It was that we had to figure out a different way of distributing food. And in this case, the Fraser Valley has a high population of supply managed products. In BC, we are a strong supporter of supply management. This is a national program that runs right across Canada. So British Columbia is responsible for producing like eggs, milk, chicken, our percentage of a national need. And so the magic of supply management is that when one thing goes down in one part of the country, other provinces can pick up. And so in BC, for dairy, we're part of the Western Milk Pool, and we're also part of a national scheme. And so we won't run out of food. And so I also encourage people to not be as enthusiastic when they're shopping. Thank you.
Last question, Vinder Sajan, CTV.
Premier, just wanted to go back to your comments at the beginning, hearing that there may be more fatalities when it comes to this event, and just wondering, does that refer to just what's happening in Lillooet, or is that in other areas as well? And also, can you maybe give us for people who are out of their homes due to flooding, can you give us a sense of what type of assistance the province will be providing in the longer term?
I was referencing, as RCMP Representative Stubbs, Eric commented that there are persons missing. Searches are underway. We're hopeful for the best, but as days go by, hope diminishes, and we'll just have to see how that goes. But there are people, as we always know in these circumstances, our search and rescue people are out there braving the elements, putting themselves in harm's way to help those that they have never met before. So we're remaining hopeful, but I want British Columbians to understand the magnitude of this problem and the unprecedented nature of the tragedy. With respect to how will we respond to those who have lost their homes, flood insurance is not common. There are some instances where it's available, and not everyone's aware that it is. Some people will have applied for flood insurance in the past and been told by their insurance provider it's not available. It may well be now, but it's not known to them. Particularly when I think of the impacts in Merritt, but not exclusively, we have a daunting challenge ahead of us. We've already, of course, been working with the community of Lytton to respond to the wildfires that completely leveled that community, and many of those homes are without insurance. So we're working through those issues. But I think British Columbians need to understand that the past practices don't really seem to apply, in my mind, to these extraordinary events. So we'll be working with the Minister of Finance. The good news is we have significant fiscal capacity in British Columbia. Our economy is going along very well. The unemployment is down. We have more people working now than before the pandemic. And there'll be more to say on our fiscal situation as the Minister of Finance makes her regular statements as the year goes by. But I do know that the federal government stands ready to help, and we will need to look at new measures, new programs to help those people that have been devastated by these events. I can't give you a ballpark answer today until we have a thorough assessment of what the consequences are, who is insured, who is not. Minister Popham has already said on the agriculture disaster side, there are programs, federal and provincial, that can be accessed. But at this point in the crisis, most people, as Lana said, on the farm are doing what they can to protect those animals that are still alive and making sure that their life's work is as protected as it can be as the waters start to recede. So we'll be looking at the damage and the consequences and cost of that damage as it becomes clear. And I say to all British Columbians, we need to hang together in this circumstance. These are unprecedented times. We need to start preparing for a future that includes more regular events like this, and we fully intend to do that.
Follow-up, Binder?
Yes, I just want to be clear on the families who are now in Hope, should they be expecting to stay there for another 4 or 5 days before they can probably head back? And just if you can just talk also about sort of the financial impact to the economy to having these roads blocked off. Do we know already what the impact is?
Well, it's too early to say on what the consequences will be. As Minister Fleming has said, we're working as quickly as possible to, first of all, assess the damage and then put in place the programs to repair. And that will mean workarounds. Both Minister Farnworth and Minister Fleming have talked about the trucking industry, who kept us going, as we all remember now, through COVID. Our supply chains were strong because of the hard work of British Columbians, independent truckers and others who were up and traveling to get goods and bring them back to British Columbia. Our ports remain open. Hopefully the railways will be back online quickly. So I'm confident that we can withstand this and our economy is strong, but it is early days. And perhaps I'll ask Rob to talk about those that are stranded in Hope and how quickly we can get them back home.
Thank you. Yeah, and just I would go back to our efforts right now that are ongoing to be able to get through Highway 7 and find a route to Hope. So we will prioritize emergency vehicles, get heavy equipment in there to unblock the way and to restore connectivity to Hope. So we'll be updating you as accurate and real-time information becomes available.
So
and
the
of
time
course,
we have for
updating all those who are currently stranded in Hope.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.